Welcome to the DIY Venetian Plaster Wall Part 2 video, guys. I'm Brittany Knutson at R&R by Design, and today I'm going to show you the last steps completing the final finish coats to get this stunning earth tone marble smooth Venetian plaster wall. Now, not only am I going to show you how to create two different finishes with two different movements, the arced movements and the vertical movements using Amy Howard at Home's Venetian Plaster, I'm also going to give you a little bonus. How to do both of those finishes with two different tools, guys. Not only am I going to show you with the Venetian Plaster trowel, but I'm also going to show you how to complete these finishes with just a putty knife, something you can get at your local hardware store. Let's get started on what tools we need. You will need sandpaper for smoothing and polishing your wall, as well as prepping your tool, spatula to scoop your plaster, and supplies to clean your tools. You will also need a bucket of water and a misting spray bottle. For applying with a spatula, I recommend a flexible 3-inch putty knife. If you decide on a Venetian plaster trowel, here are some tips on buying the right one. You want a stainless steel trapezoid trowel designed for finishing and polishing decorative plaster. The type of material the handle is made out of is not important as long as it's comfortable. The size of the trowel that you get should be based on your hand size and whatever's comfortable for you to use. Regardless of the tool you choose, you need to break it in by sanding the edges. Lay out your sandpaper going from lowest to highest grit, then wet with a brush in water. Starting with the trowel, make sure to wet the edges. Then at a 25-degree angle and slight pressure, rub the edge of the trowel on the sandpaper. Clean with water and repeat on the other side. After about 10 seconds, clean with a wet brush and move on to the 600 grit sandpaper for both sides. As you rub, you should feel the trowel's beveled edge getting smoother as it glides across the sandpaper. After both sides are done, move on to the 800 grit sandpaper. The 400 and 600 grit sandpaper will help shape the edge, and the 800 and 1200 grit will help polish. Don't forget to clean in between switching grits. Finish off with the 1200 grit sandpaper on both sides. Once you're done, clean it well with a microfiber cloth. If you decide to use the spatula as your tool, we want to do the same thing as the trowel, going from 400 to 600 to 800 to 1200 grit, keeping the spatula at a 45-degree angle and rubbing on its edge. Before we start, we want to make sure our base coat of plaster is nice and smooth. Rub with the spatula to get any high, dry plaster points off, then sand with 400 grit sandpaper. Make sure to clean with a moist microfiber cloth. Now let's dive into how to apply our finish coats. Like this. We're going to load the back side of it where we're going to be applying the plaster. You just take the other knife like this, and we just want a little bit. Never load it up on the sides, always load it up on the middle, okay? And then when we start, just like you're reading a book, you're going to start from the left top corner and work your way to the right hand side, but then also work your way down at the same time. So it's kind of this movement where you're working, you'll go down, you're working, you're filling in, and that way it's more organic looking and not so patterned, because each time you're applying this and you're overlapping the product onto, say, the wet edge, That's what's creating this dimension that we see. So to start applying it, right? So when we start, the lower the angle we have our tool, the trowel or the spatula, the more product it's going to leave behind. The higher that we have the tool and the higher, right, the angle, the more product it's going to take off, okay? So all we want to do is get this product on our wall, right? No special way. Now this is where we start moving it, is when we're offloading, right? So we're moving it around. So say we start here and we just want to get it off of our trowel, and then we'll see it, right? So we'll come back up here where this little holiday is. We'll fill that in and then raise our angle to move it, lower, move it, lower to offload. And then that's when we would move it towards the edge. See that, how that kind of fills in? Make sure if I see it drying up or if I see it leaving scratches, that's a sign it needs to be cleaned. So now that it's starting to dry, it's like a sweet point. So if I touch it, I'm not gonna move the plaster, and it kind of has like a cool cement kind of type feeling to it. That's the good time to compress it. Not burnish it, but compress it and smooth it out. So we take our tool, right? We always wanna move in the same direction. So either it's up or down or left to right. And we just, at a very low angle, I'm dragging. It's dry enough that it's not pulling the product off, but any ridges that have more of the plaster will be wetter and will be able to be smoothed out, okay? So you don't have to go fast. Just go once across. We don't want to burnish it. Not yet. So we just are smoothing it out. Low angle. We don't want to take any off. We're just kind of flattening it. My tool, see that, how it just picks up just a little bit of the ridges? That's fine. Just clean that off. Okay, and I'm very flat, and I'm also pushing down. So I'm just gonna take my product, just like last time with the spatula. I'm gonna load it up. Well, actually, let me take that back. Since we're starting in the corner, right, it's the same thing. We're moving from the left-hand corner to the right and down. You can use the nose of your trowel right here to get into these tight corners or to get these nice lines and more control. So that's what we'll do. So we'll put it on the nose of the trowel like so, right? Always the middle, never on the edges. And we just kind of start in the corner, and we're just getting the product on here. That is our goal. And then we can lift the trowel a little bit higher to move it around. Faster, right? So now we're gonna put it in the middle of the trowel, like so, just a little bit, not a lot. This is when we're going to, remember, lower angle, offload it, higher angle, move it into there, offload, move it into there. And we want to do the arcs, right? So we're kind of doing the squiggly movements. Right? Load it on the tip just like that. Always starting in the left-hand corner, working our way across and down. Now we'll tie into that wet edge, but this is how we're going to do it. This is the difference. So we're going to load up our trowel, or not our trowel, sorry, our putty knife, like so. We're going to offload like this, parallel, offload horizontal, and then we're going to pull it vertically, right? So we're going to take it off like this, and then when we move it around and manipulate it, we're going to go vertical, up and down, okay? So we'll, whoops, just offload like this, right? Pull down, offload, down, cross, down, cross, down, cross, down. Make sure to get your seams really well down. Okay, now these two look identical and we want to avoid that. We want to overlap the product, right? Because that gives us our depth, but at the same time, we want our lines to not all be the same size, the same length. We want to kind of do some short strokes, and then we want to do some long strokes and kind of mix it up. Again, making it look more organic and not patterned. just a little bit, pull down, try to make it not always short strokes or always long strokes. We want to mix it up, whatever feels natural. Don't think about it too much. That's probably my best advice. So this is very doable with a putty knife. You don't have to have a Venetian trowel for this, and we'll see the difference after. So we're not taking off any product, but what we're doing is we're compressing it down. All of those ridges, all of those areas that need to be filled, we're smoothing it out, and we're not burnishing. And you'll understand what I mean on the difference when we get to the burnishing. Because when you burnish, you're riding the bevel of the tool, and we're not doing that. We're just compressing. Load to the side like this, and then we're going to pull it up or pull it down. Okay, so let's say we pull it up into the wet edge and down. All right, so we're back on day 2. We've let our Venetian plaster dry a minimum of 2 hours, a maximum of 24 hours before we go ahead and burnish it and move on to the next step. So this one, the first one, this is the very first sample that I showed you. This is the gray plaster done with the arc movements, but with the putty knife. And honestly, I think it turned out beautiful. I mean, would you agree? I'm actually really impressed, and I'm excited about burnishing it and seeing what it looks like. I love the movement. Simple. Now, the big differences that you'll see is it's a lot more subtle, right? And that's for 2 reasons. The first reason is because of the size of the tool. Remember when I told you that if you use a smaller putty knife versus a larger one, you're going to get a busier color because you're having more layers overlap each other. The same thing is happening here. My Venetian trowel is much bigger than my putty knife, right? So the surface area that I'm spreading the product is larger, so that's why we're getting less overlaps and a more subtle appearance. But I absolutely love this one. I love both of them. And no wall will ever be the same. Even if you do the same movements on, say, a second wall, it's always going to be a little bit different. This is why it's considered an art. So this is the gray. This side was done with the putty knife, and this side was done with the Venetian trowel. Again, do you see how subtle the Venetian trowel one is compared to the putty knife? Less layers, less coverage. It's the same thing that we talked with before when you do the arc movements. The tooler is smaller, but it is totally beautiful. I think it turned out beautiful with the putty knife. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do your entire wall with a putty knife, and I'm glad that I showed this because that will help a lot of DIYers. Obviously, it's faster with the trowel, but it doesn't mean that it's less beautiful. So let's. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, regardless of what tool we're using, is to sand it with 600 grit sandpaper. It can be the strips that you get for the sanding pads. It can be a sanding block. It could be round. This was just a big sheet that I cut to size for the size of my hand. When I wear my gloves, I feel like it sits in my hand well, and I don't have any problems with it coming off my hand. So we want to do circular motions, right? And all we're doing is just smoothing this out. Circular motions, smoothing out any rough texture that was left behind, but at the same time we're burnishing it. Okay, now that that's wiped away, we are going to burnish it with our tool. So with this one, we're going to use the same tool we used to apply it, the putty knife. So when you're burnishing, you want to move it kind of in all different directions. So, because we want to make sure that all of the high points are being hit and burnished. So we don't want to just go one direction. We want to pass each area about 3 times, but we want to make sure we're pulling it and burnishing it in all directions. So even if that's circular motions, or if you're pulling it this way and then you move to this way, and vice versa. So, and I'll show you, and we're going to ride the beveled edge that you see on your tool right here that we made from sanding. So we'll start here. So we're just going to and if you'll notice how it's starting to shine, and we don't want to lift our tool up too much. We want it at a low angle so that we don't scratch our plaster. All of those beautiful high points are getting darker, and that's where we're seeing the shine. Now we're going to use our trowel. Same thing with the putty knife. We're going to ride the bevel edge, right? And we're going to make sure that we burnish it in all directions, okay? We don't want to miss that and go, every area about 3 times is normally what I do, right? So if we start here, and we're just pushing it out, pulling it down in all directions with our trowel just barely at an angle. Now that you're done with the final finish coat and you're happy with it, we need to let that dry for 2 to 3 days. That's how long the cure time is before we can touch the wall, use it in normal day-to-day use, or if we decide to seal it. Well, when would we want to seal it? Let me make something very clear. You do not need to seal Venetian plaster. The longer it's been on your wall, the more moisture and CO2 it's collected and crystallized, the harder the finish is going to get. But in the same breath, if you've ever tried to remodel your kitchen like me and we tried to pick out Carrara marble, they showed us what would happen with Carrara marble countertops if, say, spaghetti sauce or some wine got spilled on it. It will patina. It'll maybe have a tendency to stain. The same thing is true for Venetian plaster. It's a marble. So let's say you're going to put it in your kitchen, a backsplash, and you're kind of worried about stains happening. Bathrooms, bedroom walls, anywhere else, I would not worry about it, because if it does get oil or some kind of stain on it, it's not that hard to take care of and to clean up. If you do want that extra protection, there is a way to get it, and it's very simple. Mine your own beeswax. This is a natural beeswax paste. It's the perfect consistency to seal the wall. If you do decide to seal your Venetian plaster, that is perfectly okay. It's very easy to do. Let me show you how using the Mine Your Own beeswax. Use half of a dense foam sponge found in the tile section. Evenly saturate your sponge and apply in circular motions, making sure to get 100% coverage. Removing all the excess wax with the clean side of your sponge. Once that comes to tack, use cheesecloth or lint-free rag to buff. If you find any streaky areas, use a lint-free rag soaked with mineral spirits to remove all the excess wax. Thank you so much for watching, guys, my Venetian Plaster Part 2 video. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button. Please share this with your friends. If you want to leave me a comment, questions, or you want to see the list of products that I use to get this wall finish, please visit my Facebook page at RR by Design. Also, if you want to see my past videos that I've made, you can visit my Facebook page, or you can go to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching, guys.